I received a screenshot of a Facebook post from a friend of mine by somebody else, and I realized that it's probably time to start getting down to the nitty-gritty of telling my story. Chances are that if you're watching this video, you've either found it on YouTube or you've found it through my blog on drlukegordon.com if you were stalking me on the internet. I'm starting to grow somewhat wary of the continuous onslaught of insignificants who are very brave armchair critics when they are behind their keyboards. You may or may not be aware that a few years ago I was suspended and ultimately removed from practicing as a plastic surgeon due to an extremely sophisticated and well-funded media campaign waged against me, which can only be described as a typically sensationalistic trial by media. All the material on the internet is based on the accounts of 2 or 3, maybe 4 unhappy patients who had been recruited by a particularly sinister couple of psychopaths. And as a result, the impression gained is that I was or am this grossly incompetent surgeon who would set out every day to harm people. Now, an appropriate metaphor is that it's very much like an iceberg, and the picture portrayed in the sensationalistic media can only be likened to the tip of the iceberg, in which you only receive the top 5% of the iceberg. But there's a story below the surface which is untold, and it is massive, and it needs to be told. This is the screenshot that I received. Some insignificant who's completely unknown to me by the name of Axel Bierman, in which he reposted a newspaper article on IOL entitled "Butcher of Benoni struck off role, can't practice as plastic surgeon anymore." Let me make it clear from the onset that I've never met this Axel Bierman in my life before, but apparently he's a wannabe journalist. As you can see from the screenshot, there was a reply by one Moira Ann Blades, in which she states, "I thought it was this guy that keeps popping up on Facebook. People you may know, delete. Almost 30 years ago, he was having an affair with someone I knew well." To which Bierman responds, "I'm serious. Do you gave any insight? DM me." I presume he means, do you have any insight? Now, Moira Ann Blades is certainly sailing very close to the wind in terms of a case of criminal defamation. A mutual friend of mine who has way more knowledge and insight of the actual story happened to see this post and actually challenged him on the content and the necessity to post such scandalous and defamatory material. I may well cover the content of his reply in a future video, but it's actually quite disgusting, actually. It was my intention to tell my full story in a book that I'm currently writing at the moment, to give a shocking, countervailing view of what the real story is behind this sensationalistic garbage. But in the light of the continued onslaught against me, I believe that it's appropriate to start telling my story now, because I'm really growing somewhat wary about this particularly vindictive and malicious content, which some individuals with much schadenfreude like to share on social media. Of course, there'll always be individuals that will ignore the truth no matter what they are told, and they seem to relish this rather cheap sensationalism. But nevertheless, it's a story that is so shocking and dastardly that it simply cannot not be told. Suffice to say that there are parties and stakeholders in the story that have rather cleverly managed to portray themselves as paragons of virtue, announcing to the world in their consummate piousness their role in exposing me as this incompetent and heartless butcher. Of course, they've managed to hide in the wings, and their nefarious activities have never been exposed. Until now, of course. I intend to deal with the whole butcher issue at length in a later video, and to reveal the actual source of the label that has been bestowed on me. It would indeed be a great pity if this story was not put out into the world, as it is of such a shocking nature that it could well be worthy of a Netflix series. You know, the ones where they expose these travesties, these egregious travesties of justice. I've decided to go ahead with putting my story out into the world because the material for the book is of such a voluminous nature that I'm really not certain as to when I will be able to publish the story. But you can rest assured that the day will come where it is ultimately published, and perhaps my doing regular posts on installments of my story will hopefully spur me on to actually complete my book. I certainly hope that Mr. Boeman and Moira Ann Blades will actually get to apprise themselves of my version of events, unlike the vitriolic media who relish the prospect of a sensationalistic story and don't bother to actually apprise themselves of another version of the story. I once made a grave error in actually believing that I would be afforded a fair hearing in the press, but alas, the press have a habit of fucking it up royally. In future videos, I'll be sharing my journey through this debacle and systematically showing up the nefarious bottom feeders that are involved in this saga. In many respects, it's actually fantastic that the internet has platforms which allow people to tell their story without it being egregiously distorted by these sickos. In her excellent book entitled Shame Nation, The Global Epidemic of Online Hate, Choosing Kindness and Compassion in an Age of Cruelty and Trolling, author Sue Sheff refers to a, quote, nation of finger-wagging vultures who delight in tormenting us and shredding our reputations. This culture of destroying people with a simple stroke of a keyboard has become much more of a fad. It's the new normal. In a 2014 survey conducted by YouGov, 28% of Americans admitted to engaging in malicious online activity directed against somebody they didn't even know. How have we become this shame nation where we are constantly hurling our collective outrage at an endless supply of fresh victims? Is there anything we can do to stop this before it affects us all and the people we love? Of course, shaming in America dates back to the days of the Puritans, when persons who were deemed to have crossed the thin moral line were subject to being stoned, scorned, thrown into stocks, or worse. Just a generation ago, an embarrassing gaffe might have been written up in the local paper or gossiped about over backyard fences until it was old news. But today it's much different. The internet has an eternal life and a boundless reach, and the victims of a digital disaster must learn to live with forever with the implications of that high-tech tattoo, unquote. Sheff refers to being a victim of a cyber attack as having the potential to ruin your life, financially, emotionally, and physically. In the most extreme cases of online harassment, we have seen the worst case repercussions over and over again. Young people taking their own lives and adults losing their livelihoods. Now, whilst I will not give the satisfaction to my haters by taking my own life, they have certainly succeeded spectacularly in destroying my livelihood. And what you will see in the videos to come will be an expose of a shameful and scandalous witch hunt orchestrated by two professional men. What you'll find even more shocking when the time comes is the actual reason for this vile and depraved plan. One of the first questions I'm always asked when I recount my story to whoever wants to listen is whether I actually slept with their wives or girlfriends or committed some other heinous crime which would justify such conduct. And the answer is no. but you'll simply have to wait until I disclose the motive of one of the psychopaths involved. So to finish off in the words of James Baldwin, quote, "The most dangerous creation in any society is a man that has nothing to lose," unquote. Indeed, this is a battle which I've been fighting for a long time, little knowing that I didn't stand a snowball's chance of winning, due to a multitude of factors which will shock you. If you receive value from my videos or this video or videos to come, please consider supporting me on my Patreon page. The link is in the description below. Dr. Luke Gordon signing off here for today, and look out for my future videos.